We have a question from Mit Solanki who says, in general, how would you quantify the information asymmetry amongst the people of China and the rest of the world? Great chat, by the way, smiley face.
That's a great
Saurabh,
question.
I don't think that's the smiley face he
It's
used.
like that. It's like that one. Yeah.
No, but it's a really good question because I think we often don't get that. So much of the information there is mediated through censorship. Even though you have like vibrant social media like WeChat and Weibo, the fact is that the things that get traction there are things that the government's kind of happy to allow. So just to give you a small example where like I'm still on WeChat and go through what friends of mine are posting, right? So I think a lot of people in China somehow during COVID, it really hit me that how they're living in such a parallel universe, because I found that most people there have the view that the government did a great job in bringing everything under control by the summer. They felt that China was leading the world and how they controlled COVID-19. And they somehow felt that the world would be grateful or appreciative of how they've handled it. And to me, being here it just showed that people are in such a parallel universe when there's such anti-China sentiment in India, all over the world throughout 2020 because of COVID, and then here because of the border as well, right? So, but there, everybody is of the view that they had handled it very, very well. They were leading the world in handling pandemics, and the world was kind of looking at them awestruck. And this is a narrative in the state media that most people would believe. So there is a huge amount of information asymmetry. Of course, it works both ways. Or I think some of the information that we get from there as well might not always be accurate. But in China, it's so acute because you don't have that many sources of information. Even if you have different media outlets, a lot of the stuff that you get about India, I think, if I use India as an example, it fits a stereotype where there's very little original reporting from China coming from here. The few Chinese journalists who live here work for state media. So whatever they file is going to be, unfortunately, it's going to go through what the government wants to portray about India. So broadly speaking, they like to show India as being kind of chaotic, democracy that doesn't function very well. They like to showcase, for example, India-US closeness as something threatening to China. So these are kind of themes you see. And I think one of the big tragedies is both here and there, there's not much reporting about kind of like the ordinary lives of people and how, and so I think people are a lot in the dark about that. And so I've had Chinese friends who visit India over the years, and they're always shocked by, especially if they visit big cities, right? It's for them, it's a complete contrast to the India that they experience from their media, and it works the other way around as well. When I have Indian friends visit China, it shows I think the media on both sides are doing a pretty poor job.
Like you said, it's so funny that state-controlled media tries to portray this, because in one of your most recent things in your newsletter about how the US is being portrayed with this current thing, and there's a certain sense of, and I'm going to use that word, there's a certain sense of Schadenfreude in the way that
you were waiting to use that word in some conversation. You love bringing that word. This is the fourth time I've spoken to you, and each time we do a live, you talk about property taxes and Schadenfreude. You have to bring it in.
Schadenfreude is my basic life motto. So no, there's a certain sense of, so that even when they report on the US as state-controlled journalists, so whether they report on India as state-controlled journalists, and they sort of create these infallible cahoots, so to speak, is there any sense of independent journalism that sort of supersedes that you can sort of find on the dark Chinese web? Is there a possibility of that?
There was a lot of it when I first moved there. It was great in the Olympics 2008-9. They were opening up, and 3 or 4 Chinese media outlets came up that were doing great stuff. They still exist. There's one that also publishes in English. It's called Caixin, Caixin, and they do really good reporting when they're allowed to. I think there are fantastic independent journalists there who are waiting to do great work. A lot of them end up leaving and going to the US or working for foreign media outlets as their researchers, even though they're fantastic journalists. Occasionally, the state allows this. And it's interesting to see when Wuhan happened, when the outbreak happened in December, I think the central government in Beijing was feeling that, the story that they were getting from the local government was clearly not the reality. So the cover-up that happened throughout December and early January was essentially the local authorities in Wuhan were feeding up numbers that didn't make any sense. They were saying that the cases weren't growing at all throughout early January. So at that stage, it was interesting to see that I think the central government in Beijing allowed Chinese reporters from other provinces to go to Wuhan and report. So there's lots of excellent journalism that came out in Chinese throughout January and February that were telling us about what happened in December, how hospitals were being overcrowded, how doctors were getting sick. So obviously they knew this virus could go between people, but the government wasn't saying that. So I think it was a great reminder of how, when allowed to do this watchdog role, the media in China can do it. But then I think by March, when the central government felt that it was more important to get the narrative under control, bam, there's another kind of clamp down, and it was back to just having the dispatches from Beijing. So it's quite interesting that it does exist, and it was doing a great job up until 2012, 2013. But I think under Xi Jinping, a lot of space for that has declined in a big way.